We Lived in the Sky by George Fitzgerald, Chapter 1, The Flats of Ballymun, Dublin, 1969. The boy watched the fight from behind a huge rock. The swords clashed, the man in the green suit jumped back. It was a fence to the death. Then Robin Hood charged into the duel, holding tight to a smile in the face of terrible danger. A brilliant light burst upon them, blinding the Dark King, while our champion sprung into the air, pinning him to a tree. Little John arrived on a brown horse and picked up the lad from behind the rock. Meanwhile, Robin Hood stripped the king of his cloak and they rode off into the sunset. Joseph, my twin brother, and I sat on the floor clapping when our hero saved the day. We stayed there until Ma turned the telly off and the black and white picture decreased to a dot. "Okay, it's time for bed," Ma said, picking up the scattered cushions from the floor. We rose and walked along the hall, clasping Da's hands. "Good night. Don't forget to say your prayers," Ma shouted. "Okay," we hailed in unison. "Da, will you tell me a snorty?" I chanced while he took me in. "All right, but it'll be a short one. Once upon a time there was a little boy." I smiled and rubbed my feet together when I heard "little boy." I glanced at Joseph. He was fast asleep. "Da," I said, cutting in on his story. "When I get to be a big boy, I'll learn snorties and tell all the boys and girls snorties." "There's a good boy. But it's stories, George," Dad urged. "Snorties, grey," he replied, and before he could utter a word, I fell headlong into dreamland. An angry wind blew fiercely at the window above my bed. The curtain shifted as a peal of thunder ripped through the heavens. I shot up and just as quickly dived beneath the blankets. I lifted my head and stared at the walls, imagining they were closing in on me. The blast raged across the blackened sky, shaking the glass. I drew a long breath and disappeared, covering my chin so that my eyes could only be seen. It was the dead of night. The streets below were silent. Where was Robin Hood? Would he appear? I waited and waited, but he didn't come. Once again I directed my sights towards the ceiling. My lip quivered. Mysterious shadows grew from a creeping hand into a hideous monster. Was it a monster or the big bad wolf? I wouldn't think or talk or whisper his name. The big bad wolf. The roaring noise terrified me. The rain blasted our 10th floor window like bullets. I flung back the blankets, fled past my sleeping brother and reached the top of the hall. The walls moved, or at least that's what I thought, bringing me face to face with the bodiless Indian statues hanging above me. I swallowed hard, fell into a crawling position and stole past, my body trembling as my eyes on the statue followed my every move. The voice from the television came to me like that of a friend. I reached for the door. My hand took hold of the handle. There was a pause. I pulled it down. It creaked. The door flung open, and on seeing Dad sitting in the chair, it flew straight into his lap. I was shuddering when Ma brought me a little drink and wiped my cheeks. "You don't have to be afraid. It's all right," she said as she ran her fingers through my hair. Resting in Dad's sturdy arms, and with Ma's reassurance, I felt safe. "I can count to 20, I muttered into Dad's face. "I know, son," he said, rubbing my head. My eyes closed and I drifted into a world of fairy tale adventures and childish dreams. Morning arrived. I lay there in bed, counting numbers in my brain and talking to God the way the teacher showed us. She said God always listens to the boys who tell him things. So I told him how my little brother spits out his food when he doesn't like it. Then I told him about scary monsters and asked, why doesn't Robin Hood never turn up when you need him? The thoughts of the night rushed through my mind, the darkness, the stillness of the room, and monsters trying to eat me. I turned my face into the pillow and prayed to God to save me from monsters who eat you at night. I looked at the ceiling and said, "I can count to 20. The sound of flapping wings landing on the balcony awoke my brother. I realised this because he jumped and yawned, and when the yawning stopped, he leaped out of bed and fired back the curtains. Joseph, I said, taking my eyes off the black sky for a moment. Aliens took me away last night. I know. I was there too, he replied, nodding his head. Were you? I didn't see you, I gasped, waiting to hear his version of events. Yeah, I dashed up a hill. There was loads of sweets and big teddy bears everywhere. I pulled my ears to my chest, drew the blankets to my mouth and hung on to his every word. Joseph padded around the room, expanding on his adventures with the visitors from the moon. When I cut across him, I walked up a hill too. There was a castle that had a load of trees outside, and the trees had big eyes and two mouths. Joseph stopped in his tracks and sat on the bed when he learned about the gigantic eyes and two mouths. What happened next? I crept into a door and saw the ghost who I was sure was an alien. He said hello. I didn't say hello back. I kept running and running until I fell off the mountaintop. Then I woke up. Everything went quiet in the little bedroom. Then Joseph jumped and ran, screaming, Mama, George is frightening me. The door slammed shut. For a tiny moment, the night vision came back. I saw a footpath, a river, and a crossing beside a bridge made from thick branches. Nearby, a sign said Matter's Farm. I passed over. In a long shirt, no trousers or stockings. I carried a book under my arm. There was a wood ahead. The trees were old, beaten by time, bent by age. The fallen leaves created a carpet. Each leaf had unique colours. Tiptoeing along, heart-warming tunes accompanied me. However, the noise of the slamming door caused me to dive out of the bed. Now I was running, yelling behind Joseph, dragging the blanket between the streaks of light coming in from the early morning sun. The first person I saw when I entered the kitchen was Pat, our little brother. He sat strapped in a chair and he was firing food around the place. Ma washed the dishes, star shades in the bathroom. We could hear him sing. So I pushed Joseph and stepped into my favourite stool. The kitchen had a small window with lace curtains and tiny vase filled with fragrant flowers. Ma said she closed her eyes and imagined she was standing in a beautiful garden. Dad said it was good she imagined it because on the 10th floor there wasn't much hope of a garden. I closed my eyes and pretended I was in the Doctor Who box. Dad said, no point in being boastful. The kitchen was not that big. Our family moved here to Ballymun in 1966. To the land of dreams, the modern world of the working class people. For residents it was comfortable, for outsiders would see it in an altogether different light. The massive towers housed some 90 families each. 7 towers were erected in grey concrete surrounded by 4-storey and 8-storey blocks. The corporation's monument to the housing problem of the early 60s. Most of the tenants came from rundown tenement houses, entire households who had lived for generations in a place the historians described as a city with the worst slums in Europe. Chapter 2. It was May 1971. The old radio sang a song called Where's Your Mama Gone? Joseph and I joined in while Pat played with his spoons, sending food beyond the kitchen floor. Dad whistled as he came out of the bathroom. Right, boys, wash your hands, face and teeth. You can't have any breakfast before your Holy Communion. Afterwards, you can have a big treat. This is your big day, a wonderful day, Ma said with a smile. By 9:30, Ma fit us into our new clothes. Now we are ready to go. Joseph and I left the flat and raced across the landing. We pressed the button on the lift. It went green, which meant it was working. That made us glad. Dad said he was going to the shop. He wore a grey suit and black shoes. He carried a raincoat over his arm. Matt arrived with Pat in the buggy, and as if by magic, the lift door opened. She wore a smart blue suit and a big hat. Joseph and I dressed in school blazers, short trousers and long white stockings. We even had the same black slip-on shoes and the school caps that carried the logo. There was a glint of pride in Ma and Dad's eyes, and we felt like big boys now. Ah, they look smashing, Marie, a neighbour hollered from an open window on the second floor. Ma turned and waved. There's a few shillings for the boys, said the same voice as we watched coins fall and land on the path as if from heaven. Joseph and I sprinted in different directions. Ma tried to draw us back. Come on, Dad said. as we divided the money and stuffed it into our pockets, planning what sweets we'd buy later. "Thanks, I'll see you later, Mary," Ma said, waving back as we moved on. "She won't see me later," I heard Dad say through the side of his mouth. We arrived at the church to walk down the aisle and found a seat. That wasn't hard because we arrived first. The benches must have been cleaned because the smell of polish was still very strong. The sun was now streaming through the coloured glass. It was like the entire world was on fire outside, and we were safe like Noah and his family inside the ark. At the top of the church, a chubby-faced boy dressed in a long white dress was standing with his elbows resting on cushioned chairs. He jerked his head back and gave a little sigh that said he was bored before sitting down and fixing his gaze on us. "I met Mary O'Rourke in town last week," Ma whispered to Dad. "Yeah? And how's she keeping?" asked Dad. "Well, she's away from Tommy and back living in her mammy's house. There was terrible trouble." Ma whispered something into Dad's ear. Dad looked at Ma looked at Dad, and they both looked at us. And we looked at them, while the boy in the dress stared at us all, so I looked towards Jesus, whose eyes seemed sad. I let my mind drift and thought of Susan, who lived in number 20 in another block. Last week she was in her kitchen and I was there too. She went to the press, took out jam and bread and gave some to her little brother, who said, "Ta, George Fitzgerald, would you like bread and jam?" "No thanks. Me ma said I should take nothing from strangers." "Well, my ma said you should give nice things to strangers." I stood there and wondered which one of us was a stranger. I imagined how nice it would be to kiss her. The teacher's words came rattling back about sin. The priest made his way towards us. I bowed my head in prayer, wondering if he could read my mind. He bent to talk to Dad, who lifted his ear to listen to him. And Ma smiled, nodding in agreement. Big people always smile and nod when they meet holy people. They nod their heads, their chins, their hands. And if the person is really holy, they give a little nod with their knees. Then they sit down until another holy person comes along, and the smiling and nodding starts all over again until the old people who sit at the back are fast asleep from all the nodding. The large timber doors opened, a creaking sound sent an echo through the church. Families rushed in, pushing each other out of the way to get a seat. The bell rang. Everybody stood up and leaned forward, then knelt. They sat back down. When the bell rang a second time, everyone stood up again. So this is how it went: standing, kneeling, sitting, fidgeting and scratching. I heard a mother in front, "I'm telling you, Timbo, I'll bite the arse off you if you don't pull that hair again." The parents stood back, where we stood out in single rows, our hands pressed together. The boys wore uniforms, while the girls were adorned like princesses. We watched the priest read from the big word. My heart clung to me because I knew what happened next. He handed me a little wafer and I swallowed it. For us boys, this was a big day. We received Jesus. That's what the priest told us. So now we were holy. I'm Holy Joe. No, I'm a Holy Joe. Your name is George. Ma, George said his name is Holy Joe. Tell him I'm Holy Joe. Ma and Dad burst out laughing. Dad gave a little cough while the priest glanced sternly, but Ma couldn't stop. The bell rang again and we blessed our faces and left all holy. Once we were outside, I rang along the concrete steps at the side of the school. I rested, tilting my head back underneath the summer sun that made an immense appearance on our holy day. Like all young boys, I was new to life. The air was clean, everything was fresh. It was a giant adventure. But like all adventures, real or imaginary, there's always dark pastures laying ahead. Nobody gets to rest into the harvest of his dreams without first entering the dungeons of his nightmares. But this little boy, one just lay ahead.